And when people come to us and they are like, oh no, XR is a gimmick, who is actually using that? We reply, everybody. Like everybody is doing VR reviews and they are doing that not once a month, they are doing that weekly.
You heard that right. XR as a daily work tool used every single week across the automotive design industry. My guest today is Victor Perez, XR sales engineer at Autodesk, specializing in spatial computing, immersive experiences, and the future of digital collaboration. With a background in engineering, 3D design, and technical sales, he has worked with industry leaders including NVIDIA, Adobe, Sony, Meta, Apple, and Logitech, driving the adoption of emerging technologies. And this is not something confined to enterprises.
You can basically today download VRED, get your model, get the Vision Pro application, and visualize directly out of the box. This allows to connect these high-end RTX power computers, let's say, directly with a headset and be able to have this end-to-end streaming solution.
We will also discuss how Gaussian Splatting is making its way into the most demanding pipelines.
So we are able to consume either PLY or also a custom formats like LCC from XGrid.
Who is wearing this headset and how collaboration actually looks like.
The person that is modeling in Alias can modify the object, the modeler, and you can see the changes live. So it becomes, let's say, from a visualization platform to actually an orchestration platform.
And of course, what is the role of AI within a much broader and ambitious vision?
Many times it feels like AI is an extra piece of work that you have to do on top of your work so that it actually gives you value. I think if you are getting pushback, you are not working on the right implementation of AI, then it shouldn't be on the software.
But before we get into it, I wanted to remind you that if you don't have the time to watch the full interview and want to learn from other founders and creatives at the intersection between XR and AI, you should definitely check out the XR AI Spotlight newsletter. By subscribing, you will get weekly interviews like this directly in your inbox and access to a list of tools and apps that allow you to experience Gaussian Splatting in VR, on Quest, and Vision Pro. Just check the first link in the show description. It is now time to roll the title and welcome Victor under the spotlight. Victor, it is a real pleasure to have you here.
It's my pleasure, Gabriele. I'm super happy to be here, and I've been following your work for a long while, so I'm happy to be able to finally contribute to it.
Here you are. And look, it looks like it's been a busy year, for sure, at Autodesk, because there have been several announcements over the past weeks and months. So maybe just to get started, and then we'll see how we can dive into the different topic. Can you break down the different announcements that are adjacent to XR and AI that have been put out by Autodesk over the past months?
Yeah, so this has been a work that has been going on for the last 2 years. We had partnerships with, as you were mentioning, companies like NVIDIA, where we've been working with their team specifically from the XR team, trying to see how we can bring the high fidelity that VRED, for example, brings to the table to headsets that are light and portable. So if you think about what XR was 5 years ago, we were miles away, with clunky setups, outside in tracking. And really, we were trying to bridge the gap to the point that only with the collaboration with these partners, we're able to really fill the gaps, let's say. In this case, this collaboration with NVIDIA has allowed us to just release an application. Last March, we made the announcement through GTC in collaboration with our partners from Inactive. Basically, this allows to connect these high-end RTX power computers, let's say, directly with a headset and be able to have this end-to-end streaming solution. This is also leveraging some new technologies, for example, this foveated streaming that Apple has made available in the latest version of Vision OS that is fully natively integrated into CloudXR 6. So now by leveraging this technology, we are able to get the best of both worlds, the high computing capability and the super high-end visualization.
We're going to discuss about that because I have a follow-up.
Okay.
And then Vision Pro was one, but I believe also there's been Gaussian Splatting flying around, and not just as a buzzword, but something actually being implemented.
Yes, so that is since 2027 part of our software suite. So we are able to consume either PLY or also a custom formats like LCC from XGrid. So it's been a rush, to be honest. Like I was looking forward to really testing and getting my hands on with it, but because we didn't have support for it in our software, it was a bit limited. Now that we have it, we can go full hands on. And to be honest, I've had a hard time trying to decide where to spend my time over the last month, especially with so many different platforms coming to the Gaussian Splat community, let's say, you know. So right now, for example, a super interesting collaboration that we have is with Sony. They have a spatial capture solution they were displaying at AIF last week. So super interesting and looking forward to testing all these different capabilities.
Vision Pro will dive into it, Gaussian Splat as well, because use case around the automotives is like exploding. And even though we're being very cautious, right? Because there is a lot of promises, but a lot of things that do not work exactly like CAD designers would like. Anything else that maybe people might not have heard that you think fell out off the radar?
So do you mean about Gaussian splats in general?
In general, when we think about the work that you at Autodesk are doing with XR and AI enabling technology as well.
Yeah, so I think we are trying to expand because AI, when people think about it, think LLMs, but when you get in the field with 3D, it goes in every direction, right? So from diffusion, image generation to VLMs and so on. And now, for example, the super interesting thing that we're working on, for example, with a team from Inactive has been integrating VLMs using Spark as a computing device that then can, let's say, accelerate and augment what in the past was simple visualization to being something that helps you orchestrate your job. And that, for example, VRED becoming from the main visualization engine that only visualize to be a central repository of data.
So let's start unpack this, right? You mentioned that VRED now support Gaussian splatting. Can you tell us how the, let's say, workflow looks like right now?
So in this case, we don't actually generate the Gaussian splat, but we can consume it. So we do support two different file formats. Right now, we support PLY, so you can import from any different Gaussian splat generation software. We also support custom formats like LCC, and we're having a look at LCC too, so the new, more optimized version from Xgrid. So in this case, we still cannot rely, but you can import them. And in this case, the way we are focusing it is, trying to use the Gaussian splats in the place where they make most sense. So sometimes if you talk about something like a car, it's something that is actually a bit against Gaussian splatting because of there's, a lot of reflective surfaces, a lot of glass, and these things that are really hard to be captured in the Gaussian splat. And we're trying again to put it where it makes sense. So if you think about a customer, let's say a car maker that wants to develop a product, their main product is always going to be the car. It's never going to be things like capturing the environment, generating 3D assets. So it's a lot of things where time was spent but didn't actually bring value to them. So many of the features that we're trying to work on with Gaussian splats are actually onto putting them where it makes sense. So environment generation, we're experimenting with Marvel as well to be able to generate from 360 environments to generate assets, and then see how AI can layer on top and really augment your work.
Okay, so we are basically talking about creating this environment, and what's the end goal? Like, because of course, when implemented something like this, there are a series of, let's say, use cases, either more or less tested or speculative in a way. So how are people using these splats right now? When I imagine there is maybe a car in a scene, is that to create renders? How does that work?
So it depends. To be completely honest, we are still experimenting with it and trying to understand. So sometimes you put a feature and you don't know exactly how it fits with customers, and then you have to go back and forth and understand how they actually want to use it. And then we try to evolve it in the direction that it makes most sense for them. So right now, from our understanding, we're focusing on, as I was mentioning, everything that doesn't actually add value to your core product, which is in many cases, we work in mobility, we work with companies like BSH. They just published a paper, actually a blog entry in our Autodesk design community, where they are explaining how they use it to create appliances from homes, for example, and how they capture the environment in Gaussian splats and leverage that on the scene, so that actually the time that they spend modeling and creating the model is all spent on everything that matters to your actual product, let's say. So we're trying to you will hear this a lot with Autodesk: accelerate and make you faster. So that's the main goal that we have, is actually to have every hour that you have on the day spent on what actually matters.
Indeed, because I think also when you think about capturing cars, there is always, like, depends on how many features there are, it always looks like there's a level of cloudiness to it in a way, right? It's not extremely sharp and clear. And also, then the splats remain as a background, as something like as part of the environment that supports then the core product, the core design that is in it, correct?
Yes, and exactly, because with splats you can capture a lot, but being really accurate gets really hard, and sometimes it gets counterproductive how much time you actually have to spend to get the perfect splat. We're trying to go the other way around, and where you need perfect, let's say, surfaces and so on, we keep that in CAD, and we can orchestrate using something like VRED. You can pull data from all these different environments and make your product perfect, and then everything else can be generated through splats. So right now we can ray trace, and we can do, for example, reflections for splats. The only limitation that we have right now is that we cannot light the scene itself because it doesn't have image-based lighting. So we still have to combine with HDR maps, for example. But it's something we're looking at, and hopefully AI in the future can bridge the gap at some point. Fingers crossed. Let's see.
And indeed, maybe for anybody interested, I think you might also be aware about Volinga, that is the solution for Unreal that they're doing, also specializing on a specific, let's say, Unreal Engine plugin that supports this relighting. They were a guest here at the show, so just check one of the past episodes with Fernando. He was here, and we had a chat about indeed the proxy mesh and other methods to achieve that kind of relighting. So exciting. And then we mentioned about the world on Vision Pro, right? And this ability indeed of streaming from a powerful PC, RTX powered, to the Vision Pro. How does that work? Is that a standalone app? And maybe can you elaborate a little bit on how also the onboarding of people, in a sense, is taken care of?
Yeah, so without trying to make it super long, when the Apple Vision Pro was launched, we had a lot of customers actually coming to us and asking us, okay, how can we leverage this new technology that, it just looks amazing and it just works many times. And then coming to the headset, we were in conversations with Apple and so on, and because it doesn't have, let's say, an integrated OpenXR backend, we couldn't just connect to it. So whereas many of the headsets actually give this capability, and we in VRED also can connect directly to it, we couldn't do that with Apple Vision Pro. So that's where we started coordinating with partners like NVIDIA, like I was mentioning in Active. And this all led to this application that basically allows any customer just to go to the Vision Pro App Store, download the application. And by the way, I don't know if any of the let's say people that are watching the podcast know, but we also have a learning edition, which is completely free and available for not only for students, but for anyone that wants to learn VRED. So the combination of these both makes it that you can basically today download VRED, get your model, get the Vision Pro application, and visualize directly out of the box. So I think it's a great evolution from, a couple of years ago when you had really expensive headsets, not access to the right professional applications and so on, to today being able, as long as you have an Apple Vision Pro, small detail, then you can basically just jump into extended reality in a couple of clicks. So, yeah.
So there are a couple of questions that I've just specifically regarding the tech. When we think about streaming, there is always this issue about latency, right? How challenging was it to sort out a good level of latency, still keeping that high fidelity and the streaming? Are there some specific requirements from the user perspective, besides, of course, the powerful PC? But that's, I would say, secondary, but what is it needed? What have you done in order to make it happen?
So I think Jensen is going to love me for this, but GPUs, that's the main thing of the equation. All the models that our customers are using are huge, and we're talking about, 100, 200, 300 million. So it's nothing that could run locally on the headset. And that's also the reason we went full streaming, was because not only you don't want to have, let's say, barriers on how big the model can get, but also we have something that is called live link, which allows you to connect your VRED model with, for example, Alias. So that basically the person that is modeling in Alias can modify the object, the modeler, and you can see the changes live. So it becomes, let's say, from a visualization platform to actually an orchestration platform, where you can still be in the headset doing the review, say, for example, with your Muse pen, for example, make an annotation, say, I don't like this, I want this modified. And they can simply go and modify that, and you can see it live on the Apple Vision Pro. So that's the way we went, and I think it's what makes most sense if you think about being able to make a live link, not with one person, but with 2, 4, a team of 8 modeling at the same time while you're visualizing.
The collaboration is one of the things I want to ask you. Before that, there is another aspect that has to do specifically with the Vision Pro itself.
Mhm.
It is not the most enterprise-friendly headset, not because of its capability, but because of the management systems, for example, for the headset and the whole. It's not a headset that you can easily swap between users and lend and borrow, right, and so on. What has been your experience when, let's say, working with this automotive company that are actively using this device in this very highly controlled, regulated environment?
So it has been an educational experience in both ways. So we have had a lot to learn and also a lot to teach to customers on how to best use the headset so that you don't find these hiccups. Basically, what I recommend is using guest mode, saving it as long as you have an iPhone that you can use, for example, in the company. You can save your settings, just look at it, it auto-loads. If you have inserts, then it knows that it's actually you. And then the rest, we try to take it through our application itself. So everything in the past, for example, issues that we had were around model positioning, for example, because you are in a collaborative session where you have 4, 8, 16 people in the same room. The last thing that you want is for the model to be offset. You want it to look perfectly and with as little effort as possible for everybody. So we are actually coordinating with the team from Active to be able to orchestrate this all through the app, through, for example, markers, QR codes, and also using the management system for sessions for Apple. So if anyone is joining remotely, it automatically triggers the persona. You can connect through the cloud. So it's been a job of trying to break all these barriers down so that everybody can actually enjoy the experience in the best way.
Still, regarding that, Victor, I do want to dig into that collaboration. One thing is, like, I still hear people saying, like, it's hard to deploy this Vision Pro on the ground, right? I'm not talking, of course, on the shop floor. I'm talking inside, let's say, the offices. Do you feel it's still the case? It's still complicated to have an enterprise organization manage and deploy. I'm not talking about hundreds, but maybe 5, 10 of these headsets in a way that people can use it, and you know where the headsets are, what kind of applications are on them. Because in an ideal world, right, what you will go is that you have this management, you decide which app runs on what, they are consistently updated, and so on. Is that the case? Is that can be achieved now on Vision Pro?
I hope I don't make many enemies in Apple with this phrase, but I think with a, let's say, device that was born as a prosumer device, there's always bound to be some limitations and hiccups into it, especially if we're not talking about any enterprise, we're talking about design studio where it's even more controlled what data can get in and out, internet access and so on. You have customers that have had issues with cyber attacks and security and so on. So you can imagine that it's kind of an extreme in and of itself. So I think it's bound to have some issues. What I can say on my experience working with the Apple team has been that, I had never had contact with them. And since we began this collaboration some years ago, they have shown their willingness to help customers. They've been hands-on with them on site. So I think we're going the right direction. And for Apple, for example, yes, they had managed devices on enterprise, but maybe not to the level that the Apple Vision Pro is really something that you were close to you. Is more, let's say, more of a personal device, let's say. So I think there's still some things to adapt, but I think it's going the right direction from that point of view.
Collaboration, right? So when we are talking, and you mentioned about the offset of the model, we are talking about co-located collaboration. So people are physically all in the same space. So let's start with that, because when we think about a Quest, right, there is that scanning of the room, there is that shared anchor. I'm using that as a reference, right? And devices are using different approaches also, because, for example, we also have the spectacles that have this kind of like much more streamlined approach where you basically like the two users look at each other and everything is more or less aligned. And it is that more or less that I'm a bit skeptical, in a sense, like, how do you manage to get that alignment, right? What's the process behind? Do the users, is the software aware of the environment, or indeed do you use maybe like a piece of paper you put somewhere that serves as a anchoring point that could be totally fine as well for, let's say, for a team? How does that technically work at a high level?
So we are basically using the image anchor. That's what we recommend. You can also use, there's a capabilities in ARKit to be able to look at each other in automatic alliances. As you are mentioning, it's not 100% accurate. And when you're thinking about something where a millimeter actually makes a difference, you can only go so far with the device. So now we are seeing the first trackers coming to market for the Apple Vision Pro as well. And we have companies like Run Studio. They were showing last week how they managed to merge their tracking system with the Apple Vision Pro as well. So they can, for example, get a sitting bag. You can sit inside and everything is in the place that it should be. And it automatically aligns and it corrects over time as well. So that's super interesting. But yeah, I think it's a work in progress. And as you're mentioning, it's a device. It was the first introduction of Apple onto the XR market. And there's a lot of learnings to see. It's easy to say for the Quest 3, where they have been in the market for a long time. But I'd say for a device and a company that is a newcomer, let's say, even though they have a long history.
And I would argue that on Quest 3 there is this promise that the spatial anchor works flawlessly. I haven't experienced that very often, and I don't know. We can all blame it on the developers in a way, but I think that these kind of things are trickier to achieve still on a, let's say, much more headset with more mileage in a way. But then, going back a bit more beside the technicalities, right? How does this session looks like? Like, who is in this headset? Are we talking about executives? Are we talking about designers? Because there is always this feeling like, oh, the Vision Pro is for the fancy presentation for the executives. and I can see that. And I can see that playing a role.
It's a bit of that as well.
Yeah. Do designers, product owners, or others come in and join for what purpose? Can you a bit elaborate on what you have seen so far?
Yes. So there's this thing where, because it's an Apple device, it has more acceptance, let's say, towards more senior executives, chief of design, and so on. So there is this thing that plays a role. I have to say it's a positive thing. Many years ago, when you were thinking about these clunky headsets with cables and so on, many of these executives were actually reluctant to try and visualize in the car because they didn't want to put that thing on. And it's a shame for people that love technology like us, but I can also see the reason behind it. So I'd say it's this dual connotation that Apple Vision Pro is also a positive because it has opened a new market. And let's say, given this technology, some visibility on, let's say, the upper tiers of a company. So also, if you think about the technology guy that had to manage the budget and the expenses and justify why he wants to get that, now that he has approval from the top, these things get massively quicker and easier. So yes, it happens a bit of it, but you see everybody in the company. So from the designer to the manager to actually the chief of design, everyone is enjoying the experience. And I think that's one of the things that Apple does really well, this polished experience where everything just works. And it's something that we're trying to get on board as well, right? Not to depend on the super expert and the super complicated setup to actually enjoy.
So if you could kind of like sketch out a percentage, I mean, I don't know if you do or if you can, but what's been done in this headset? Is it more like designing, reviewing? Because I think that there are different processes, right? Like there is the design where someone actually puts a headset and look at it. And then there is the review where it's like, okay, we have a team meeting and okay, let's spend some of this time reviewing and talking. And that's one thing. And then there is presenting. It is still a different thing in a way. Of course, there is a review that is partially a presentation, right? But when you're presenting to something, then it's like, oh, now everybody's here. There is this presentation about the product. Can you kind of like give us an impression?
So I couldn't say how much it is from 3. We just released a new feature in Alias, which is called View in VR, which leverages Vulkan and ray tracing and so on. So you can actually visualize while you're modeling. That is a newer feature though, so I couldn't say how much of the spectrum, let's say, falls into that category. But from the other side, I think it's yes, you have these presentations on massive power walls where you have like all the most important stakeholders, like board meetings, something like that, and they can decide and visualize newer models. But that is, I'd say, like the 1% kind of presentation where you have all these people. Usually we're talking about, designers modifying, CMF artists coming and deciding on materials. On lighting, for example, lighting simulation is a big topic where you can visualize and ray trace lighting simulation straight on the application on the headset. So one example that I always like to give is, with the rise of displays on the screen and windows and so on, you always get that stray light from the sun that blocks the screen completely or flashes you and so on. And that is something that wasn't able to be tested before. And now with ray tracing, you can simulate and see if, let's say, you have that visibility at any point in time.
That's fascinating because also you can imagine how people at different heights, they might also have a different style, the way they drive, right?
Exactly. Or for example, one thing that you see a lot is with a lot of Asian car manufacturers coming to Europe, you see a difference on how they are designed because of the different geometry that people actually have in different markets. You can see that reachability, for example, in European cars can be an issue for a nation that is getting the same car just because of extremity length. And it's something that is, of course, you go for the percentile, for the median and so on, but you cannot cover everybody, right? So it's really interesting to be able to jump in the car and say, okay, can I reach the door? Can I grab everything and so on? And do it fully digitally without spending a single euro.
Spending and euros, that is the other important thing, right? Like in a sense, like we all
open Pandora's box.
No, you did it because actually I was not thinking about business model. I wanted to keep it all inspirational, but that's the reality of this, right? I mean, like when there are these kind of like investments from a company, and it's not the 3,000 euros for 4,000, whatever it is for the Vision Pro, because that's not really the expense. The expense is the investment in building something, in training people, in committing or using it. Have you experienced like a story or a case where we say, okay, we were clearly able to prove the ROI on investing in this visualization in VR compared to maybe doing something on a screen?
So it happens everywhere. So when you're talking to customers from the fashion industry, for example, where they do these physical mock-ups every week, every 2 weeks, they will have a modelist actually coming and doing for, let's say you're talking about the fashion bag, you're doing 10, 20, 30 different revisions of the same bag, and everything is doing by hand, right? So if you think about just something as simple as that, being able to, from 30, reduce to 10 to 5, it's not only about, as you mentioning, it's not only about the money, it's actually about the time, right? That it takes for that person to actually, it requires 24 to 72 hours for every one of them. So if you think about the full development of the bag that takes from 3 to 6 months, now reduced to a single month because you were able to visualize those models directly inside of the headset. And as you're mentioning, it's not about the headset cost. That is, in the end, long-term is not so much of an influence, but something that you cannot get back is time. And at the same time, a person that spends 1/3 of the time on the same project means that he can do 3 projects in the same time, right? So it's all about productivity.
You mentioned fashion. That opens another question because we were discussing a lot about automotive. But before that was another thing still about collaboration. And have you managed to test, or does the current version support personas? Because as we can imagine, multiple people co-located in the same physical environment, I don't see why someone couldn't join from another country as a persona. That should be like huge, one of these huge value proposition that is like, is this photorealism of this representation for Apple Vision Pro. Does that support it? Have you tried it? How does that work?
It does, and it works really great. To be honest, it's really fun to get up to a persona and have a high five with a person that is sitting hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. And if you think about, we have many customers that had headquarters, let's say one in South Korea, another one in Paris. And they want to be able to visualize at the same time and have at least have a voice, have an input on the design instead of having to do 2 separate sessions that have nothing to do with each other. So what I've seen, for example, we used to have, let's say, an avatar representation in VRED that was kind of like a robot, right? The problem with that is there's so much to a meeting that is communicated in a non-verbal way that does not get interpreted. So the integration with personas, it does work, especially well using the cloud. And it gives you this next level of interactivity and giving your input. Everything, when you're thinking about design reviews, everything is about giving your opinion, your input on a matter. So anything that you can do to communicate better is just, worth it.
Also, does that mean that if you are hosting, so you are streaming from a capable computer, let's imagine, right? And I'm joining with Apple Vision Pro, how's that work? Like, do I also need to be linked to a computer? Like, how's that?
Yes, so right now we're using a one-to-one connection. So you need to have one VRED session running with one Apple Vision Pro. So you have this server-client connection. The thing is, if you're joining remotely, or let's say as long as you have internet connection, you could be in the middle of a cabin in the mountains. If you have internet, you could host it, for example, in something like AWS. And we have our partners from Inactive are actually doing that right now. So you can have the same session is automatically loaded to a server in AWS, and that is directly streamed to your headset. And because of the, let's say, lightweight nature of CloudXR, is able to stream it, and the latency actually is pretty decent, pretty good. So we've seen customers directly, if you're sitting in your home and maybe you just came with your laptop, right? That is light and fancy and so on, but is not able to run VRED. You can directly pull a session from AWS, stream it straight into your headset and be able to collaborate with those colleagues. So you're no longer seeing the result of that session, you're actually contributing to it.
Because in all honesty, I haven't seen, besides we are talking here, we are in a whiteboard scribbling things, and it's all good. I do believe that there is that value, but I haven't seen many practical examples yet, at least, of taking advantage of that insane level of realism that you get with the persona. Because I generally think that right now we are past the uncanny valley here. It really looks real. You wouldn't.
And it's getting better every day.
If your mom sees you on a chat with that, she would think it's you. She would. So I think it's and it's great to see that companies are finally using it for the purpose that is like, okay, we're not meeting just to talk, but we need to have a purpose, because that's it. Because otherwise, just talking, it loses the purpose of wearing the headset. It doesn't make sense. I'm wearing the headset because there is a common purpose. There is something, reviewing something, working on something specific. And then the persona adds that layer of communication that, of course, is just possible thanks to this photorealism.
Exactly. And just tapping on what you mentioned, because of where VR originated from, there's still this thing where people see VR as like gaming and video games and so on. And we see it on completely the opposite spectrum, right? And when people come to us and they are like, oh no, XR is a gimmick, who is actually using that? We reply, everybody. Like everybody on the automotive design industry, for example, specifically, is using VRED to a degree, is doing VR reviews, and they are doing that not once a month, they are doing that weekly. So when, they see, for the average population that is not a VR user, they see it as something that is fun. For us, it's a work tool, and it brings so much more value to the table.
I want to branch out for these automotive things, because there is more at Autodesk happening. Like, time ago, you also released this Autodesk Workshop XR that was more geared towards the constructions, engineering.
Yes.
In that case, on a Quest standalone, right? So with different kind of like use cases. Now, is that solution still supported? Are there some lessons that you have taken? Are those two separate teams? How does this XR is driven inside Autodesk, maybe?
So it's two separate teams. Workshop XR actually came from an acquisition of Prospect. That was another standalone application, but the core idea behind it, it's a similar thing to what we do with the VRED team, for example. So whereas that runs locally, it's still connected to Forma. So the model is just unloaded, but never stored in the headset. So basically what you're visualizing is a live project that is living in the cloud. Forma is Autodesk Construction Cloud, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know about it. So what it basically does is allows you to visualize, modify, make annotations, and review models directly in VR inside of the headset. And the only connection that you need to internet is when you access the model, not while running, and it doesn't need any computer running by itself. It's just pulling the model from the Autodesk
standalone,
server.
let's say.
Exactly. And to that point, it's the lesson that we learned from it is that the actual value of the visualization doesn't rely on the headset itself. It relies on the platform and the actual, let's say, capabilities that you build around. So in this case, is the ability to open the model and modify and add annotations and have everything saved automatically. So anything that you do in Workshop XR is then being showcased for anyone that has access to the model. That connection can be some Revit user that suddenly gets a notification saying there's a modification to do this, you should check this out. So yeah, we just learned that the value is not on the, let's say, the image that you see in the headset, but actually what you can actually do with it.
So this was an example of architecture and construction, engineering. You mentioned, of course, about automotive, where there is this VRED shines, let's say, but then you also brought up the fashion industry, right? I do feel that there is this focus on this automotive. Is that deliberately like a communication, let's so to say, marketing choice? Because it's for people that don't see the back there, it's very hard to make a bridge. They will just assume, okay, this is just for automotive, nothing for me. But then you mentioned fashion, and I can imagine product design, right? Of architect, like interior design in terms of furniture, for example. I can see that easily having huge advantage for something like this. How is that? Is everything that we have said something that applies directly to them, or maybe more loosely?
I think it does, but it's sort of self-fitting cycle where because many people in the automotive industry actually use VRED, those cases tend to be more visible. Also, there's, let's say, a sexy factor to car design, right? That helps and yeah, it leads itself to marketing really easily. So from that point of view, I'd say we are not limited to automotive. Anything that is 3D can be visualized, but also, to be completely honest, because there's a price tag that comes with VRED and the professional application, those customers that tend to be bigger enterprise tend to use it most. So it's just a chicken and egg kind of thing.
I mean, I wouldn't even say chicken and egg. I would say just positioning of the product that fits better to an industry, maybe more than another. But then, of course, not every, let's say, furniture makers are the same, right? There is also different tiers of those. There is IKEA,
also,
and then
I guess it also depends on your constraints that you have for the model. VRED is really good at being physically accurate, color correct. And for many applications, for example, furniture, you might not need this level of color accuracy that maybe you would need to produce a carpet, for example, that you need to create a spec from to be sent to the producers. So it's different, maybe different levels of requirement for both.
there is one thing that we haven't specifically tackled while we move towards the end of the conversation, and that is a bit like the role of AI. And it's a very broad, right? When we say the role of AI, it can be anything. So can you maybe give us a glimpse of what are you guys thinking about, exploring, or maybe you have already implemented in some way in a creative industry that feels both threatened and empowered by AI coming into our working stations, let's say.
Our product managers were discussing and showcasing everything that we're doing in AI, from model creation to visualization, asset generation, environment generation, everything from end to end. So what we're seeking as Autodesk, and I can actually feel that I'm a 3D generalist in my heart, so I can see how someone could be feeling threatened by it, right? What we're actually trying to do is to empower you to, as I was mentioning before, to just spend your time on whatever gives you more value. So if you're a 3D generalist, what do you enjoy most? Is it the image generation? Is it the modeling? So we're basically trying to strip out everything that you wouldn't enjoy on your job. Let's say you're the organizational tasks, all the model management and so on. Let's say we see a lot of integrations with PLM, so all the naming conventions, trying to have that automated through the API in the background. So let's say add things like the Autodesk AI assistant that now has access to the API and can modify things on the fly and give you time for what you enjoy most doing. So as I was mentioning, now with our tools through AI, you can be faster, you can do the things in half the time, which means that you can spend double the time on whatever you enjoy most. And that actually makes your design truly shine.
Have you Have you heard pushback within organization when showing the kind of like integrations that you are putting in? Because again, both from high level leadership sometimes, from maybe like the designers, is this a narrative? Because I can totally buy into this, because again, I'm on your side of the fence, so to say, right? The innovation side of the fence. But are there sometimes pushback that you have got within this organization?
I think if you are getting pushback, you are not working on the right implementation of AI. If a thing is anti-user, then it shouldn't be on the software. Because in the end, we are doing a software to make you faster and quicker to get a better product, but we're also making the product for the user itself. And we just add to the software whatever it really makes sense for the user. What we see a pushback, for example, is with, AI and trust is a big thing inside of Autodesk. So we've seen a lot of people complaining about where you're getting this model from, where is the data going, is it used for training and so on. So we have a whole trust team inside of Autodesk that is dedicated to approving model. We have one pager showcasing that where the data goes to from end to end. So something that when you thought about some years ago where everyone was trying to publish whatever they did in AI, we were a bit more quiet because we were still trying to figure out what the best way was to approach this and to actually keep your data secure. So instead of jumping into the AI bandwagon from the first minute and doing it the wrong way, we actually took some time to make sure things worked for everybody. And because we have these massive customers that actually rely on our tools for doing the daily work and for going to market, we cannot just start doing things without thinking about the repercussions and just fix it later. So we really wanted to be straight about it.
So what's next? I mean, I know that this is kind of like a running train, right? So I think that it feels like there is so much going on at the same time. And I mean, really happy to see like all these implementation announcements recently in the past few months, again focusing with real value on XR, Gaussian splatting, that again it's another interesting technology when used in the right way, right? Where do you see this evolving forward, let's say in at least this year and maybe like a bit of a long-term vision?
So what I was thinking is, when we talk about AI, people have in mind LLMs and maybe diffusion and so on, but AI is so much more. So I really think that I found really interesting, for example, is some work that we have been doing with the XR team from NVIDIA, with specifically Greg Barbone's team and with Inactive, where you can deploy models, have them run locally in something like a DGX Spark, so that you can have a layer that is running, for example, a VLM. So this model can see what you see in the headset and can actually either make annotations, take actions. Basically, it knows what you know and it can take actions based off it. So it's the next level of, let's say you're doing a review, you see something that doesn't work. It already saw that because you mentioned that. So it's already taking action in the background, right? So what I see next is how do you accelerate this next step of, from some years ago where you went to a meeting and you had the meeting notes and then you had to clean them up, go and clean. How do you go from that to you do a meeting and once you go back, it's already taken action for you. It's already sent the mails that had to be sent, already scheduled everything. So how do we actually make you more productive without replacing you? So
I think you're totally right. And so far, nailing that level of 3D understanding of AI at something that I haven't seen. There is all these robotic fields, right, that aims at solving partially also this problem. But otherwise, so far, AI is you either write a text and generate something or even a 3D model. But how do we generate value from the spatial understanding that AI can have besides the robotic? Well,
yes,
this is
and
an
I think
example.
also, how do you use AI without it being an overhead on your work? Because many times it feels like AI is an extra piece of work that you have to do on top of your work so that it actually gives you value. And how do we remove this layer in the middle?
Victor, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. Looking forward to more of the stuff that you guys are working on. And if you will find more in the link in the description below. Victor, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, remember to leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlights on the greatest founders and makers, pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. Also, make sure to check out the show page xraispotlight.com, where you can find more conversation like this one. Till next time.